Hey guys, and welcome to another Destiny Council video. I'm John, and I'm joined by Luke today.
How's it going?
And we're here to talk about the new Holocron update. So, only a couple of changes, just two, so we're pretty happy about that. I think a lot of people were scared about like massive meta changes right before Worlds. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and start talking about the first change. So the first one is Maul's Saber. You now have to spend one resource to roll it in with its power action, instead of just being able to do it for free. Still has the shield restriction, so yeah, the only change is that one resource on the power action.
Yep. So essentially what this does is it limits the ability to use the power action early in the game. When you're spending 3 resources to pay it, you probably don't have extra resources to spend to roll it back in. So this limits the the turn 1 dealing 8 damage with Maul Saber alone sort of plays. But it's still late in the game. It's still a super powerful weapon. Being able to use it, you consider that use it twice. You consider that one resource you're getting 2 to 4 damage out of it, which is still pretty good for a resource. So still a very powerful weapon, but kind of limits the absurd plays, especially early in the game.
Right. It has like a built-in overpowered lightsaber throw.
Yeah, basically.
Right. That doesn't work against shields.
Yes.
But yeah, so we'll just talk a little bit about how it affects the decks. As a blue character only and as having tons of modified sides, there were very few decks that actually played in it at the moment. The main ones were BroTK and Seven Sister Boba.
And I guess the Kylo decks also played it.
Right, Kylo decks can also play it. I guess I'm being biased because I haven't seen many of them in our region.
Yeah.
But they're still definitely out there.
They're out there and they do play it.
Yep, so. Definitely. As far as how it affects BroTK, I think that BroTK gets hit hardest by this nerf because it's bad matchups, where the matchups against like these really strong aggro decks where BroTK needed to kill them faster than they could kill BroTK, and BroTK needed to like start playing combo pieces on like turn 1 almost, because if it went to turn 2, they'd lose Seventh Sister right away. So they'd be forced to like price a failure and try to hit that 10 damage mark to kill a Phasma or something. And they could do it, but the thing is, the games that were where they could do that best was with a Maul Saber on turn 1, where they went Enrage Maul Saber, and now they deal an extra, 8 damage from that die alone. Was one of their best ways to come back in these matchups that were considered, unfavorable. And now without that, it really does have to get lucky on like drawing an untapped card and just untapping and hitting that 10 damage mark on turn 1, because otherwise these aggro decks will come out turn 2 and they'll kill Seventh Sister before they can do anything. That, or they need to draw like Force Illusion and Best Defense. Right. But with only those 4 options, they were kind of like doomed in these matchups.
Yeah. And so, but it is important to recognize that the matchups that BroTK crushed in, it's still going to crush.
Yes.
So if this doesn't kill the deck by any means, if you've been practicing a lot and feel comfortable with it, I still think it's a legitimate deck that you can bring to Worlds. Still super powerful, has lots of matchups where it just rolls the opponent. But this is going to hurt those aggro matchups where it really wanted to pump out damage early.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Boba Sister?
Yeah, so for Boba Sister, what this does is it kind of prevents the absurd turn 1 plays. So when Boba Sister could get out Maul Saber turn 1, you would almost always see 9 to 10 damage and often 14, 15 damage if the player also had like friends in low places or something like that, which is pretty absurd. And I mean, in our play testing, we had basically come to the realization that the best way to play Boba Sister was to put in a bunch of resource cards, like adding Truces and maybe even Enraged, and then draw cards like Boundless Ambition so that you can guarantee that Maul's Lightsaber turn 1, because it's almost an auto-win in that deck with Maul Saber as it was. This errata does take away that play, which I'm glad of. I think that play was feel bad, and I did not want to see that take over the meta. So the turn 1 Maul Saber is still really good in the deck because Maul Saber still has some of the highest sides of any upgrade in the game. It still pairs well with Boba specials. You're just not going to get double use out of Maul Saber early like you would before. So it by itself is not going to deal 7, 8 damage turn 1. This may change people's strategy when playing against Boba Sister. They might start going for Boba more. And what that does for Maul Saber as well is it makes it a late game closer with Seventh Sister. It's still, you're going to be able to use that power action later in the game once you built up some resources. And when you do, that's a great closer, right? You're paying 1 resource for another 3, 4 damage potentially, which may be all you need to finish the game. So Boba Sister, I still think will be one of the top decks in the meta. This takes away some of the absurd I win turn 1 plays, but the deck is still really strong. At the Fargo Regional, I only played Maul Saber a couple times, and I was able to win all the matchups where I didn't play it too. So it's by no means a necessary card for that deck. It just brought it from very good to sometimes absurdly good. And this brings it back down from those absurdly good games to a more reasonable level, but still very strong.
Yeah, and I'm pretty glad that it was hit. I'm Maul Saber in general because I think a lot of people were upset with how Bird DK played. So nerfing its bad matchups kind of discourages playing it, definitely. And I also, Boba 7th wasn't really on the scene for the longest time. And then it came on board, and if you look at like regional wins compared to other decks, it's already like way up there. And it's only been played in the most recent regionals. So it's definitely one of the best decks, and it's clearly one of the easier decks to play, or else people wouldn't be able to pick it up in a single week, or however long they had to practice. So I think that nerfing a deck like that, just reducing its like turn 1 potential is pretty nice. As you said, it's like no one wants to get hit by for 15 damage. It's like the old days when FN played Boundless on turn 1, and you're like, why? Yeah. Why is this a thing?
I mean, people talk a lot about non-interactivity, like Sabine being an NPA experience, but I think another big NPA experience is the decks that can just kill your big character turn 1, and Maul's lightsaber was probably the biggest enabler of those plays. So
yeah.
I think it needed to get hit. I'm glad it got hit. But it got hit in a way where it's still super powerful. You probably keep playing it in those decks, and I don't think it knocks any of those decks out of the meta, so I think overall a very good change.
Yeah, so moving on, we have running interference. It's now been Imperial Inspection, so when it is used, it gets set aside. So it can't be brought back by like graveyard effects. It's gone forever. I like this because the problem with RI for me was the repetitive, nonsensical. You can't activate. You can't play a card because I played an ambush weapon, and every single turn they do that. Now it's become more of a combo piece. You use it once with a combo card to punch somebody really hard. It's no longer viable in these decks. Like Pohondo could run it with like 8 ambush weapons, and it would just every turn it would be like, oh, you can't remove a dice, you can't remove a dice. Really frustrating experience.
Yeah. And I'm happy with this nerf as well because I think it is important to have cards that can help get around removal in the game. But running interference was just so much more oppressive in that respect than any of the other cards that allow you to do that. So cards like Kitten Run, Tactical Mastery, Quick Draw, Swiftness, those type of cards are all other ways to get around removal. And this errata puts running interference more on the same level as those cards, which I think is what you want out of those cards. You want them to be one-time use, not consistent every single turn.
Yeah. So, and the biggest thing for me is that people don't like playing against Sabine. And I felt like running interference took any deck and made it a Sabine deck. Because if they have an ambush weapon, it's now a Sabine effect, essentially. And that's what I didn't like about the card. So going forward, as far as what decks this hits, I think it hits decks that used it as a nuisance primarily instead of a combo piece hardest. So this would be a deck like Yoda Hondo.
Well, Yoda Hondo didn't really use running interference.
It depends. I mean, some listed, but like, well just let me explain. So like, there's some Yoda Hondos who would use it as a piece to be like, they'd go first, they'd activate, they'd say you can't activate a character. They'd like play a bunch of stuff, and then they'd hyperspace you, and you couldn't have done anything in your turn. Right now, that type of Yoda Hondo goes away, which is I'm happy, and you leave the Yoda Hondo that plays still really good. I don't, as you said, like not every list ran it because it's kind of inefficient in the deck because there wasn't really a combo with it. But it also takes away the Poe Hondo that did the very similar thing, but then also did the ambush weapons with it, where you run the gun suite just so that every turn you can be like, play it down, you can't play a card, roll out, and if you happen to roll like specials, they can't remove them. If you happen to roll, range sides, they can't remove them. That type of stuff gets significantly nerfed, but I still think it leaves room for decks like Sabine to play Never Helm of the Odds. It leaves room for a deck like Obi Maz to play Concentrate, or on that crucial turn, even just use it with like a ambush weapon if they have to.
So basically now it becomes a combination of like Swiftness and Quick Draw, right? You can either use it with a combo piece like Never Tell Me the Odds or Concentrate to turn those dice and make them unmitigatable. And it also gives you the option to use it sort of like a quick draw, where you play an ambush card, then activate your character, and their dice are unmitigatable. But now you have to be a little more careful about how you use it. You can't just use it whenever you want. You've got to decide when are these highly impactful moments, and that I want to use this, that I really need unmitigatable dice. And I think it will still be real effective at that. I honestly do not think that Obi-Maz or Sabine Ezra should take this out of their deck. It's still so good with Concentrate and Never Tell Me the Odds, even with one-time use. And in a pinch, it's still really good with those ambush weapons to give you an unmitigatable rollout, kind of like a pseudo quick draw. So yeah, I like the change. It gets rid of the most NPE parts of it. In my opinion, those every single turn you can't remove my dice, and the like tempo pieces that were just really annoying. Like you can't activate a character, you can't resolve your dice. It's probably not going to be used for that quite as much now, which will be nice. It'll kind of take away that super irritating double running interference. So.
Yeah. Just as I said, when you have those speed decks go out there and be like, you can't activate, and later on they'd be like, you can't resolve dice, and then they just like hyperspace you.
Yeah.
And you're just like, well, this is fun. And then you go to the next turn and they do the same thing. It's like a miniature time walk on your opponent.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, I still think it stays in the decks where it was biggest. So Obi-Maz and Sabine Ezra. I think it takes them down a notch, where the games where they get like two of them super early was just completely obnoxious to play against. So I'm glad that that's a way on. And I'm kind of glad that it takes out the fringe, we just play running interference because it's a dumb card thing.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like a cool trade-off. It's like a swiftness that costs 0, but it can be like, people know it's coming because it's on the board, and it can also, it's like, one action slower.
Yep.
And you can also like vandalize it or rend it if you see it on the board.
Yeah, and I think with the with how it reads now, it gives some interesting choices for the owner of running interference. So, for example, if I'm playing Obi-Maz and I go into a turn and I think I might be able to roll into killing damage to one of their characters, the question is, do I use the running interference on that Vibro Knife, or do I save it for a Concentrate play? Before, it was like, I'm just going to use it on the Vibro Knife, and then I'm going to use it on the Concentrate next turn. Now it gives you a really interesting choice. Is this moment big enough for me to use it, or should I save it for a bigger play later? I think it's just a much more interesting card now, actually, than it was before.
Yeah, definitely. So overall, what decks do we think benefit the most from this? So in my opinion, one of the decks that benefits the most from these changes is actually Thrawn Talzin. Now, I don't think that this skyrockets Thrawn Talzin into Tier 1, unbeatable range, or anything like that. I just think that one of its harder matchups, one of the more annoying things, is that it can actually lose to Bro TK just because of Maul Saber. So I think Bro TK is now a win for Thrawn Talzin. And then the Maul Saber turn 1 from Boba 7th was also like impossible for Thrawn Talzin to beat if they didn't call, 2. 3. So I think it helps a little bit in that matchup, but I think that the nerf to running interference is the biggest deal for Thrawn Talzin, is that some of those running interference interactions were just so messed up for a deck that's completely built around keeping its characters alive. As I said, I don't think this like skyrockets it. I just think that these are relatively light changes, and I think that the deck that these light changes affected the most would be Thrawn Talzin.
I also think potentially a deck like Yoda Hondo might benefit as well, simply because it's playing a lot of control. To basically those decks that do play a lot of control cards that kind of got screwed by early running interference plays, will not have that happen as much. But I don't think any of those decks benefit an exorbitant amount, because you're still going to see running interference with turn cards. Those decks are still going to be able to avoid damage or avoid removal when they really need to. So it's a little boost to those decks that played heavier on control, but not a huge one.
Yeah, so I think that they're fine changes going into the Worlds. I think they address some of people's problems with the game.
Yeah.
So I like that, while also being soft with the touch, so that they're not angering people who play these decks. I'm sure they'll be upset about them, but they're not going to be like, you banned these cards.
Right. It's not going to kill. I don't think it kills any of the decks you're seeing in the meta. It obviously hurts some a little bit, but not enough to really like shut them out of the meta. So we'll see how those decks adapt to, see if they change things. But expect to still see Bro TK and Boba Sister. Expect to still see some Sabine Ezra and some Obi-Maz. Still really good decks. You'll still see these cards in those decks. but the experience of those cards will be a lot better for your opponent than it was before.
Certainly.
So we're definitely happy with the changes. We're happy about the cards that were hit, how they were hit, and we're happy that they were light changes because it is such a great meta.
Mm-hmm. Well, until next time, guys, feel free to check out the rest of our videos, the articles on our websites that we've been coming out with. You can check us out on Patreon as well if you feel like supporting us. And
yeah. And let us know in the comments if you disagree with anything. If you agree, whatever. We may defend ourselves, we may not.
Goodbye.